Hello there, and welcome to the Summon, the African Summon, where we connect you to Africa and African culture. In today's edition, we will be reading from the book The Good Food by Cameroon's Nsanda Eba. Please invite your friends, neighbors, and loved ones and join us for this great read. While you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and share. Welcome. Chapter 1, The Raid. Mbamu stood on top of the hill and looked as far as he could see. Hills rose and fell all around him. The sky was blue and the sun was not hot now, because it was already getting to evening. A gentle breeze was blowing and rippling through the grassy slopes of the hills. Women were still working with their bare backs glistering with sweat, fully exposed to the sun and insects. The women were hoeing the ground and making huge mounds here and there where the grass had been gathered. Smoke could be seen spiraling upwards from these mounds, like the biblical burnt offerings. On these mounds would be planted next season's vegetables. The women tilled the land and planted the crops, while the men cleared the virgin forest with huge cutlasses. They also hunted wild animals in the forest and caught fish in the rivers. Mbamu could see some of the men returning from the forest with their booty strapped to the poles and carried on their shoulders. Mbamu! Mbamu! Mbamu heard his mother calling, and he yelled back, "Yes, mother, I'm coming," and ran down the slope of the hill to where his mother was working. She had already gathered her tools in her basket and strapped it on her back. "Do you think we shall sleep here?" she queried. "Don't you see that the sun has begun to go down? Let's go." They had traveled quite a good distance when Mbamu stopped suddenly, where two paths crossed, and sniffed the air. "A white man has crossed these roads today, mother," he declared. She stopped, looked this way and that, and confirmed her son's statement. It was surprising how the villagers could tell that a European had passed by. True enough, two Europeans had just arrived at Ntem village and pitched their tents in a clearing near the village. They had come from the coastal plantations about 300 miles to the south to recruit cheap and, one may say, forced labor for the rubber and banana plantations. It was said that when a laborer arrived at the plantation, he was made to plant a plantain sucker. He would be free to return to his home the day he harvested the first ripe plantain. The villagers never liked the Europeans who carried guns and canes because they spelled danger. One of the Europeans, the elderly one, asked his interpreter to call the village head. Elumba, the village head, was a strong man of about 35, noted for his skillful trapping and hunting. He came at once with his closest friend. "Go inside and meet the white man," the interpreter said. The two men walked into the dark tent. "Sam," shouted the elderly European. "Yes, sir," answered the interpreter as he came running into the tent. "Tell them to go to the chief and ask for men. You hear that?" "Yes, sir." "Men, strong men, as many as possible, 20, 30, 40, you hear?" "Yes, sir." Sam delivered the message to the village head, and as they turned round to leave, the white man called them back. "Lie down here, you dogs." Sam motioned them to the floor, and when they hesitated, he slapped them on the jaw. "Down, you slaves," shouted the white men. Then both of them fell on Olumba and his friend, beating them with their canes. Each of them had 13 strokes and 13 for the Kaiser. "Now you go to the chief, and if you fail to bring the men, we shall skin you both. Take this to the chief." It was a bottle of gin. Elumba and his friend literally fled from the tent and did not stop running until they had put a good distance between themselves and the white man's tent. They walked now briskly, neither man speaking to the other, till they reached the chief's palace. Elumba strode in and handed the bottle of gin to the chief, saying, "The white men have come and they want men. Men again, exclaimed the chief. Only last moon we sent the men. Do they? The chief stopped abruptly because Elumba had caught one of the chindas near him and given him 3 men-sized slaps, the third for the Kaiser, which sent the poor chinda flying to the wall. These slaps were for the chief, but since Elumba dare not lay hands on the chief, he poured his vengeance on the chinda. You see these blisters? Elumba pointed to his thigh. The white men beat me there, and they said they will skin us if we fail to bring them men. That night, there was great lamentation in all the surrounding village, as able young men were caught by the chindas and taken to the chief's palace. The following morning, 30 young men were presented to the Europeans. Were the Europeans happy? They sent 2 more bottles of gin to the chief. And that morning, they started their return march to the plantations. These raids for cheap labor were carried out ruthlessly throughout the hinterland villages. Sometimes the Europeans came out themselves. Other times, they sent out their messengers, who were generally more ruthless than the Europeans. Often, they demanded goats, pigs, and chickens, as well as their human booty. The night after the raid, a middle-aged woman visited her friend. Are you in the house? She greeted. Yes, I am, replied her friend. I heard your son was not caught. Yes, I was lucky. He hid under the bed when the chindas came here. Mine foolishly ran and hid behind the house. Of course, the chindas saw him and caught him like a goat. How long will they be away? Don't ask me, my sister. Do they ever return? That one is lost. I shall never see him again. My sister, don't weep. There is God. Thanks for your comfort. I think I should be going back. It remains tomorrow. Good night. It remains tomorrow. It was not quite true that those who went to the plantations never returned. So far, a few people had returned to tell dreadful stories of life in the plantations. But sometimes their stories made you want to be recruited for the plantation labor. For these people who returned seemed changed somehow. They had become more sophisticated and considered themselves the elite. They usually wore a singlet or even a shirt over their loincloth, whereas every other person wore only a loincloth, a small piece during working days and a large piece on festivals. Ekumo had just returned from the plantations. In the evening, he would wear a piece of spectacles and move from house to house with a newspaper in his hand. When he entered any house, he would choose a conspicuous chair near the door. He would sit carefully, cross his legs, unfold his newspaper, and adjust his spectacles. He always went through his ritual carefully, to the admiration of the children and everyone around. He would then begin to read silently to himself, forming the words with his lips. After calculated intervals, he would chuckle to himself, and the household would laugh at him. Fill Akomo's cup, the father of the house would say to one of the children. Akomo's cup was never allowed to be empty. Tell us a bit of what the white man has said in his book, the mother of the house might shyly be heard asking. Don't disturb him, the father of the house would rebuke. If he tells, all he has read will fly out of his head. Oftentimes, Ekomo held the paper upside down, but that never disturbed his reading, nor the admiration of his audience. Ekomo was known to be a very wise man, capable of understanding the white man's book. It was a privilege to be visited by Ekomo. Ekomo's fame, however, was short-lived due to the arrival of the catechists who brought the Catholic religion to Ntem tribe, of which Ntem was one of the villages. The catechist did not belong to the Ntem tribe, but he understood the language and spoke a little. He was, however, more fluent in Pidgin English. He first lived with Elumba, the village head, but later a piece of land was given to the church by the chief, and with the help of free labor from the villagers, the catechist built a small church and a house for himself. The catechist was very humanitarian. He visited many people in their houses, and he liked children. So he quickly won the respect and admiration of the villagers. Although his name was John, he was called by all Sango John as a sign of respect. Sango John was out one evening on one of his rounds when he met Ekumo in one of the houses as usual, reading from his newspaper. "Are you in the house?" the catechist greeted cheerfully. "Yes, we are." Ekumo did not take his gaze off the newspaper. Now he was nodding and beginning to grin. "Who's this man?" the catechist asked the father of the house. "You don't know Ekumo, the learned Ekumo, who knows the white man's book?" replied the father of the house. "Oh, I'm happy to see you," the catechist brought out his hand in greeting. But it froze in midair. Ekumo was reading from a newspaper held upside down. The hand instead pointed to the newspaper. "But you are holding it upside down. You should hold it like this." He pulled the newspaper from Ekumo's hand and turned it right side up. This had an effect on the small audience. The children began to giggle. "What's in the paper anyway?" the catechist asked. "Why don't you read it aloud so that everyone can hear? Don't be selfish. What have you read so far?" Listen, silence from Ekumo. "Let's see." He took the paper again from Ekumo, read a few lines around, explained what he had just read, and everybody cheered in sheer admiration. Ekumo never read aloud and never told anyone what he had read. Perhaps he could not read at all. Why did he remain so silent when the catechist challenged him? He must be an impostor. Shortly after, Ekumo left and never was seen with a newspaper again. News travels very quickly in small villages. Soon everybody knew of the impostor Ekumo, and from thence on, any person who failed to do what he claimed he could do was nicknamed Ekumo. And that's where we end for today. Please be sure to join us for the continuation of the story. Be sure to subscribe to our channel if you like this content, like our videos, and share. Until next time, I'm Manondo Akono saying thank you for responding to this summon.